HQ presented by Geico, Chris Hassel, Haley Sutton, Brady Quinn, and Pete Prisco. Did you enjoy the offseason last week, Pete? Welcome back. That was your offseason, right? You've been waiting for the offseason, and you finally got it. A week of rest.
Coming now.
And now
Here
you're back.
comes May. No. Unlike you, I didn't get sick in Las Vegas.
I think that's a HIPAA violation for you pointing that out. By the way, franchise tag window is open for the next 2 weeks.
It is. This is a exciting time, I guess, for some. Maybe not so exciting for some of these players. There's a couple of guys, though, that we got to keep our eye on when it comes to that franchise tag. These are some of the top guys that we could expect to get the franchise tag if a team is to get them out. You got Jalen Johnson with the Bears, a lot to talk about there. T. Higgins, we discussed with B-Mac and Tyler Sullivan yesterday on Spotlight, but a lot of interesting decisions to be made coming up now that the franchise tag window is open. Guys, that's kind of where I want to start. You see that list there. There's a couple other guys that are floating around as well. Pete, I'll start with you. Who can you realistically expect to have that franchise tag going forward?
Well, Josh Allen for sure is going to have the tag. There's no doubt in my mind. They haven't even come close to discussing a deal. They will not let that young pass rusher get out the door. So he's definitely going to get the tag. I think when you look at the Chiefs, they have to tag Snead, have to keep him around.
Is that because Chris Jones' number's too expensive?
It's way too high. It's way too high. Chris Jones is way too high.
He's like 30 million or something?
36, I think it is.
Yeah.
And he said he wants to go back, so he kind of put that out there. So I think they'll work out a deal with him. I think Snead will be tougher. I think they'll tag him as well. And I think some of those other guys are going to get tagged along the way. Look, when you have a 26, 27-year-old free agent who is in the prime of his career and you can tag him and keep him for a relatively cheap number, I think you go ahead and do that.
You know, one of the conversations we always have, especially as a former player, people will ask, hey, is this a good thing or a bad thing for a player to get tagged? Well, look, it's a good thing in the sense of clearly they've produced enough and they've showcased enough where they warrant a long-term deal. However, the team has control, essentially, and they can use the franchise tag. So, yes, you make a guaranteed high number of that one-year salary, but when you put yourself in this position, it's the worst possible outcome. You want the long-term deal. You want the big long-term extension. Unfortunately, you have to maybe wait another year before you're able to do that, either working through a second potential franchise tag and then proving yourself again to get the longer-term deal or potentially pushing towards free agency. Whatever the case may be, all these guys have put themselves in a position to really lock in on potentially a long-term deal, most likely a franchise tag in this case.
We had 3 running backs get the tag last season, big names, Pollard, Barkley, Jacobs. Does it make sense? Now, Austin Eckler is available for the tag. Does it make sense to tag a running back?
I mean, yes, it makes sense to tag a running back because, look, if they had given these 3 guys long-term extensions, how would that have worked out well for them, huh? No, it wouldn't have. That's why you don't give them long-term deals. With the Cowboys, are they glad they tagged Pollard? Of course they are. He didn't play like he did before his injury last season. Barkley can still play, but still you tag him. And I think Jacobs had a disappointing season by his standards. So tag him, tag him, tag him again.
I'm surprised you even say tag them, given how you think running backs
develop and run them into the ground and get another one. You're right.
I knew that was going to come out at some point. It makes sense from this standpoint. Obviously, even under the franchise tag, that 1-year number that you're paying them isn't going to cripple your salary cap. So it makes sense from that standpoint. If you do take on the Pete Prisco approach, where you're saying just go ahead and run them into the ground, it prevents you from committing long-term potentially to a player that's more susceptible to injury. So it would make some sense. I think for all those guys, in particular Saquon Barkley, because the offense in New York, in my opinion, truly runs through him, it makes sense. It would be nice to see them get a longer-term deal done with him, only because I think he's so essential to that offense. And whether it's Daniel Jones or whatever quarterback they would bring on this offseason to help him out, I think it's meaningful to have him there for the long run. There's still a big financial risk if indeed he does get hurt.
Okay, but the other guys, which one are you tagging? Jacobs, probably not. Henry, no. Pollard, no. Eckler, no.
The other conversation to this is last year, Barkley, Jacobs both get tagged, and then they work out a separate 1-year deal where it's sweetened a little bit in order for those guys to come back and get there on time to play the entirety of the season. That's something else that we're seeing amongst a lot of these franchise tag candidates. We saw more with running backs last year. I wonder if we'll see that a little bit more with other position players where they sign the tag, they're not overly happy about it, but the team appeases them by providing them a little sweetened 1-year deal as opposed to the numbers we see in the franchise tag.
Yeah, it's interesting when we talk about running backs, too, how much noise they made last going into the season last year with the pay and stuff like that. So obviously something to consider there. Let's talk about the Buccaneers, because we know the drama that we've seen with Mike Evans, them being far apart in terms of making a deal, but you've also got to think about their quarterback, Baker Mayfield, needing a deal done. You've also got Antoine Winfield as well. Brady, when you look at how the Bucs should handle the franchise tag era that we're going into right now, how do you approach it?
Well, look, I'd sign Baker Mayfield to a long-term deal. I think he's earned that based on what we've seen. I think Antoine Winfield Jr. has as well. But the problem is it may be tougher to come to that long-term deal with Antoine Winfield Jr. So they may end up having to use the franchise tag on him to keep him. That number is going to be a lot lower for that 1-year guaranteed salary cap hit as compared to Baker Mayfield in this instance, or even Mike Evans. So with the wide receiver franchise tag number is also much higher. So Antoine Winfield Jr., in my opinion, is probably the player that's going to end up getting it when it's all said and done. He's a heck of a player. Again, deserves a long-term deal, but Pete, the economics probably play more to Baker Mayfield getting the extension. Mike Evans maybe even becoming a free agent.
Yeah, I think Mike Evans will become a free agent. I think you're right about Baker Mayfield. I think he's going to look around, though. I don't think he's just going to take what the Bucs offer him. We had him on the set at the Super Bowl, and it doesn't sound like he's just going to take any offer. He wants to go back, but a fair offer, and I think he does go back. I think Winfield's going to be the guy that probably gets a tag. Mike Evans, I think, will test the market and see what's out there, and he's going to get some offers. I mean, he's productive. He's a little older. The contract might have to be one of those shorter-term, shorter years kind of deal for him, but he can still play.
Some feel he's already a future Hall of Famer with the numbers that he's acquired so far.
It's close.
Do you feel like if he goes to like a Kansas City or he goes to a Buffalo, whoever you want to throw in the conversation, that'd be a Super Bowl contender, do you think that's the missing piece for his resume?
I think that would play a strong part in getting him to the Hall of Fame if he were to be on a team that won a Super Bowl. That's why Kansas City makes sense. You know what else makes sense? It wouldn't make sense, at least from his standpoint, but to try and win a title, but to go play for Dave Canales in Carolina. They need a wide receiver. Well, so that would make some sense as well.
And they might pay a bunch, too, for him. He knows the system. He's been productive. It makes some sense. You wonder, though, how much he's going to weigh getting paid versus getting that Super Bowl ring, because clearly he's still playing at a high level.
Depends what the difference is. If the difference is close, then you go play for the ring. If it's not, then you go get the money.
Using Evans as a jumping off point to other wide receivers out there, T. Higgins for the Bengals, Michael Pittman for the Colts. Either one of those teams you think gives a tag on one of those wide receivers?
Yeah, I think both probably end up getting it. For T. Higgins, it's most likely because it's going to be hard to agree to a long-term deal when you still have Jamar Chase. You have to think about, moving forward in the future. And I think if you're Cincinnati, you got to lock into keeping those guys together for another run this year with a healthy Joe Burrow. With T. Higgins, Jamar Chase, Tyler Boyd, that's as three good of receivers as you'll find. You let T. Higgins go, he's a #1 wide receiver, Pete, on a lot of other rosters. I don't think people understand just how big he is, his catch radius, his playmaking ability. I mean, I look at a place like the Arizona Cardinals. If he was on Arizona, he'd be a surefire #1 wide receiver, and you'd see the production from that, too. So if I'm Cincinnati, there's no way I'm letting T. Higgins out the door this year.
I'm not letting him out the door either, but I think there is a possibility that it happens. Although there are people in the organization, when you talk to them, what they say is, look, we think it's 1 and 1A. We don't think it's 1 and 2, to your point about him being a #1 wide receiver. Now, in the history of the NFL, we've seen guys that look like they were the #1 guy when they go to another team. Alvin Harper, I'll go back to that with the Cowboys back in the heyday. Michael Irvin, Alvin Harper leaves. He's clearly not a #1. Some people thought he was. So I'm with you. I'm more to the side of I think Higgins can be a 1 if he does leave the building. I think a possibility, and this might sound strange, how about Jacksonville for T. Higgins? He was with Trevor Lawrence. They let Ridley walk out the door, so they don't give up the second-round pick to give him a long-term deal. That could make some sense for him if he were to hit the open market.
That warrants a separate conversation, though, about Calvin Ridley. And I think when you look at the year he had, it maybe didn't hit as well as we all thought it was going into the season, but still caught for over 1,000 yards, 8 touchdown receptions. It seemed like he was starting to turn on the second half of the season, and maybe that was more of a byproduct of the offensive play calling as far as the fit for Higgins there. But it doesn't get away from the point. Pittman's the other one in this conversation that I think if you look at Anthony Richardson, a young quarterback who technically you'd still say is still a rookie because he barely played in his rookie season before getting hurt, you got to provide him with a guy like that who can be the #1 wide receiver. And so for me, no-brainer. You got to find a way to keep him on the roster.
One other thing back to the Bengals real quick. Tyler Boyd's a free agent, too. He's on the market, so he's probably going to be out of there as well. As far as Pittman, yeah, I look at Pittman more as a 2, though. That's me. I think he's a good, really good 2. I don't think he's that #1 guy. He might be for them, but he's not in that top category with the true number ones. You know, now CeeDee Lamb has put himself into that conversation. Now those guys, he's not in that.
So you're saying you wouldn't tag him because of that if you're the Colts?
I'd probably still tag him, but I just don't think he's a true number one wide receiver in my book.
Let's not forget, too, they tag the guys during the franchise tag. There's still time to work out a long-term deal.
Correct.
I mean, we get all excited about this. The reality is 2 weeks from now, the guys get tagged and they still might find the long-term deal they're looking for.
Yeah, we got to talk about it, right? Let's talk about another wide receiver one, and Justin Jefferson. He's been very open about wanting Kirk Cousins to be his quarterback this year. Kirk Cousins, and I'm glad you put this note in, he can't be tagged because of his contract and the way that it's been structured. So you can't tag Kirk Cousins if you're the Vikings. Is there another area that you should be approaching? How do you approach Kirk Cousins in Minnesota?
It's an interesting question because I think if you're Kirk Cousins, it's more about, to me, where he's at in his career. He is coming off an injury, but he's at the age, too, where he may say, I don't want to uproot my family. We saw from the Netflix documentary how much of a family man he is, and at this point in time, that might take a pretty big priority over where he's at. And he doesn't want to have to learn a new system, leaving, you know, Kevin O'Connell, who's one of the better play callers in the NFL. And look, if Cousins comes back and Justin Jefferson's back, that's a pretty nice little combination to have, too. So if that's in your back pocket, you're playing indoors, too. All those things start to kind of factor in. Like, is this his best opportunity to win a Super Bowl and still cash in at this point? He's been a Hall of Famer as far as the business of football. So I think you got to factor in all those things. I do wonder, though, if he'll reach out to some of the other past coaches he's had or some of the other connections he's had out there just to see what, possibilities would be there. And I think, do you know where I'm hinting at? Do you know where would make some sense if I'm Kirk Cousins?
Where?
I don't know, maybe a team that just played in the Super Bowl? It'd be worth giving them a call to see.
Well, you're going to get rid of Brock Purdy for Kirk Cousins?
I didn't say you're getting rid of.
That's ridiculous.
I didn't say you're getting rid of him.
What are you doing?
But well, maybe for a short-term deal. I don't know how long Kirk Cousins wants to continue to play. But maybe there's a desire on both sides there.
This really is silly season.
So
if you start thinking Kirk Cousins is going to go take over for Brock Purdy.
You don't think Kirk Cousins is a good enough quarterback to help lead them to a Super Bowl?
I thought Brock Purdy played well enough to lead them to the Super Bowl.
Okay.
No.
For Kirk Cousins, I'm saying, though, it's worth him considering that to see if there's a potential chance.
What about Atlanta?
Atlanta would be one. But again, you're not talking about the same roster. You're not talking about a system that he's played in before under Kyle Shanahan, who we know drafted him and a big part in that.
Well, here's the other side of the equation. Kirk Cousins supposedly wants guaranteed money again, fully guaranteed contract. Well, the idiot GM that gave it to him the first time now works here, so he's not going to get that this time around if he's looking for that.
How do you know that?
Because they've already come out.
You don't know what the number is.
They've already pretty much come out and said they're not going to give him a fully
guaranteed. If it was 2 years of guarantees?
Fully guaranteed contract. And I think I'm with you, by the way. I think Kirk Cousins goes back to Minnesota. I think he likes it there. I think he likes the organization. I think his family likes it there. But more than that, the Vikings found out what life was like without Kirk Cousins last year, and you had to trot out every terrible quarterback in the world to play, and you couldn't win games without him. So I think Kirk Cousins goes back to Minnesota, and I think the Vikings would be smart to bring him back.
We got Spicy Pete today. He's got his shirt open. He's pounding the table.
Well, because, I mean, he's replacing Brock Purdy.
Hold on, no. I said... Here, turn it on. All right. So listen to what I'm saying. If you're Kirk Cousins and you're looking for what else is out there, why wouldn't you call the San Francisco 49ers?
Maybe, but if you're the 49ers...
They called Tom Brady, who was retired.
If you're the 49ers, do you replace Brock Purdy with Kirk Cousins?
I don't know. If I'm Kirk Cousins and I've played for Kyle Shanahan before and I look at that roster and look at their chances...
Oh, from Kirk Cousins' standpoint,
that's what I'm saying, Pete.
But why would the 49ers do it?
Because they called Tom Brady recently.
Because Purdy was coming off an injury. They didn't know if he could throw it again.
Well, maybe it was that, or even if he was healthy, they sort of signed him. They admitted as much as that.
He's fired Brock Purdy
Our social media guy, Ruben, is that cat meme.
I'm saying if you're Kirk Cousins, of course you'd want to search that out and see.
I'm Kirk Cousins. I'm searching everywhere to see if I can find a great fit and a lot of money.
There you go.
But the 49ers are not getting rid of Brock Purdy for Kirk Cousins.
I didn't say they're getting rid of Brock Purdy.
What is he going to do?
I can't wait to revisit this in the preseason.
Sit him on the bench?
Watch Jordan Love sit behind Aaron Rodgers.
Oh, stop. Brady, the guy had an MVP-like season. You're going to sit him down?
So did Cousins before he got hurt.
Ooh.
Man, Pete, you're supposed to be the hot take guy. Brady.
It's not a hot take. It's really simple. If you're Kirk Cousins, you're going to search out everything that's out there for you before you decide to make a decision signing back.
Hope you enjoyed your year, Brock, because Kirk Cousins is taking your job.
He's at the end of his career. If you're him, I'm sure he wants to win a Super Bowl. He wants to get back there and cash in as well. But he's going to search out on every opportunity that's out there for him. Of course, you're going to reach out to a lot of the teams, coaches, people that you've been involved with in the past and see what's out there for him.
Well, speaking of Super Bowl teams, 49ers lost the Super Bowl. Chiefs won it. Chris Jones, look, he could be tagged, but as you guys mentioned off the top,
really big number.
It's over $30 million. So what do the Chiefs do? They have L'Jarius Sneed as well.
Yeah, I think Sneed probably ends up getting the franchise tag, and they end up finding the extension with Chris Jones. To me, he's just too much of an integral part of that defense. I think when you look at Steve Spagnuolo does, especially in the big moments, a lot of things up front are set around him. And to me, he's the one that makes it come all together and make it work. And outside of Aaron Donald, you'd be hard-pressed to find a better defensive tackle in the NFL right now. So I would say Chris Jones has proven that, and he's going to cash in, and he's going to get paid as he should based on what he's done so far.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think they tag Sneed and pay Jones, and that's the way it will work out. You looked at the other list of guys on that list. Every one of them can walk out the door and have really not a lot of impact on what the Chiefs do. So I think the focus should be Sneed, tag him, and pay Chris Jones. And Chris Jones has said, you heard him, he came out at the parade, I want to come back, and his agent got all mad and said, hey, slow that down a little bit. But I think he wants to go back. I think he wants to run it back. They want to go for 3, and I think he does go back.
Either one of you guys on the pick 6 today?
No.
No.
This week at all?
No.
Yeah, tomorrow.
Tomorrow Brady's on. Okay, good. I haven't seen a pick 6 in a couple of days. The guys, look, they're getting a little off-season, Pete. You're not.
Of course
We're
not.
putting you to work. But Brady tomorrow on the Pick 6
Maybe he'll
podcast.
talk about Kirk Cousins to the 49ers.
That's the first thing I'd ask him.
Wow.
HQ presented by Geico, and it is coming. Pete Prisco's top 100 free agents will drop on Wednesday. Right now, a little sneak peek at the top 10. We're not going to give them all to you. Peter, you're going to give them away right here, right now? No. Okay.
No,
Gonna
you
save
got to
that for tomorrow. Okay, so let's start with the guy who is at the top of the names that you have released. Josh Allen at number 3. Is this just a flat-out no-brainer for the Jaguars to tag him?
Absolutely. No doubt they have to do it. They have a
The
new
other Josh Allen.
They have a new defensive coordinator, Ryan Nielsen, and he's going to take over, and he's a defensive line guy. That's where he made his bones. And I think he's going to want to keep him. They want to keep him. Look, the guy had a career year last year, 17.5 sacks. Early in the season, one of the things we said, I do that radio show up there, I said they don't have a game wrecker on that defense. And he put it on his Apple Watch or whatever, and I'm a game wrecker. And so he took
So you're the reason why he had the career
Really,
season?
you should get some of the money that he's going to
Prisco
get.
taking
Prisco,
credit for
the
this. Unbelievable.
influencer over here.
And you know what? He wasn't a game wrecker heading into last season. Well, last season he became a game
He
wrecker.
just needed that kick in the tush from you.
Or a contract year, one or the other. Probably the contract year. But he was outstanding last year, and I think they will tag him. There have been no real talks to get a contract done with him before the period opens. So I would be shocked if that happens. If it doesn't happen, then I think they tag him.
He's the best edge rusher that's facing potential tag. So for Jacksonville, he was the bright spot on their defense last year. Won that really when he wasn't getting pressure, they were struggling if they weren't getting turnovers. So he's a piece that is, to me, a cornerstone. You've got to continue to build around. You've got to be able to rush the passer in this league, especially as you look at that division too. Now with Houston coming on and C.J. Stroud, you better have someone opposite of him a couple times this season that can get after him and get you the football back. So to me, that's a must. I would even venture as far as saying, trying to find a long-term deal to get it done with him, because I don't think he's slowing down anytime soon. I think this is just the beginning of Josh Allen and his effectiveness too on the Jacksonville Jaguars defense.
And he also made Walker better. Walker had 10.5 sacks last year, so I think that actually gives them a nice combination there. And if you can get him signed to a long-term deal, that I don't think it will happen. But if you tag him, you can tag Ridley. So I think Ridley and him are at play together. And what will happen is if they tag Allen, they'll let Ridley hit the market, because if they don't, then they have to give up a second-round pick rather than a third-round pick. And then if he hits the market, they'll try and bring him back. You mentioned Ridley struggled. They want to bring him back. He wants to come back. He didn't know the offense last year. He said his head was spinning, and it took him so long that he doesn't want to have to learn a new offense again. So I think they might be able to bring him back as well.
I remember a couple of years ago, or a few years ago, he did catch for over 1,400 yards in 15 games and had a little more production too in the touchdown. The reason why I said try to get Josh Allen's deal done or his extension done is a year from now, right, if we fast forward, what are you going to do with Trevor Lawrence?
Right.
And so that becomes an issue trying to get both those deals done. And what do you tag Allen again for a second time? So if I'm the Jacksonville Jaguars, I'm trying to wrap this up this offseason with my foundational piece on defense to prepare myself for that long-term extension for Trevor Lawrence in the future.
Let's continue the defensive conversation and transition to the Ravens. Obviously, defense has been their bread and butter for, I don't know, since the dawn of time. Justin Madubuike, another key piece to that. 13 sacks this year, the most by a Ravens player in 9 years. So you got to think, Pete, if you want to keep that defensive stronghold going in Baltimore, this is a guy who needs to be on the roster.
And he's the target age at 26. I think when you look at this, his best football still in front of him. You can't allow him to get to the market. I don't think they will allow him to get to the market. They have to keep him. He's an up-the-field guy. He's really good pressuring the quarterback, but he's also good against the run. Not a big guy. You can sometimes run at him, but, man, he plays hard. He plays tough. He plays physical, and I think this is going to be one of those situations where you're the Ravens, you don't let him out the building.
He has the impact that Chris Jones has had on Kansas City. That's how I see him. And I think you need nowadays that interior rusher from the inside, not just on the edges, too. Another thing you got to be conscious of is the fact that you're losing both linebackers. You got to make decisions, too, behind him. So you better fortify what's in front of those two linebackers, whoever you end up signing back on your defense. Madubuike makes a lot of sense at a minimum to get the tag, if not finding a way to get a long-term deal.
Chicago Bears, obviously the most important question is with Justin Fields and what they do with him. Can they get something for him? Will they draft Caleb Williams? But on defense, a big question as well. Jalen Johnson, he says his heart is in Chicago, but his mind is on the money. He wants to be maybe the highest paid cornerback in the league. What do the Bears do here?
I think the interesting thing is just the moves they've made so far to save some cap space. You know, moving on from Whitehair, who was a Pro Bowl caliber player on the offensive line, and then Eddie Jackson, who's been kind of a stalwart and a Pro Bowl caliber player.
He was terrible last year, though.
He didn't play well last year. That being said, he has built a lot of equity up within the Bears organization. And I understand there are cap-saving moves. That's why they moved on from him. But it makes you wonder if they feel like they're maybe in a rebuild mode if they do go with Caleb Williams as opposed to keeping Justin Fields trading back. Do they then at that point say, well, why don't we let him go, become a free agent, not spend the cap space that we've got on that player, and let's build through the draft, build through some other free agents we want to bring in? It's kind of an interesting thought here. I think he, again, warrants the franchise tag based on how well he's played. But I would have thought that maybe they would have found a way to keep Eddie Jackson around, restructure it, or Cody Whitehair around, restructure his contract to keep those guys who have played some good football for the Bears in the past.
Yeah, but have played, though. I mean, they're in the past. Those two they're past. They're good.
Doesn't mean they're not good players.
They weren't last year, and particularly Eddie Jackson. He was really bad last year. So I think you keep Johnson. He's in the prime of his career. You tag him, keep him. Tyreek Stevenson on the other side has played really well.
That's the argument for why you let him go. Is because you found someone in the rookie as a rookie that's be able to come in. Ryan Poles has done a tremendous job of filling in this roster with his draft picks and his choices in free agency.
If the Super Bowl taught us anything, it's that you can never have enough cover guys.
Sure.
Right? I mean, we saw the Chiefs win a Super Bowl based on having those cover guys, and so I think you can never have enough of those guys. I tag him. They have a lot of cap room.
Well, then tag and get an extension because you don't want to handicap yourself in the salary cap with that.
But they have room, though, and they have a lot of young players, and I think they're going to – I have changed. I think they're actually going to take Caleb Williams. I do. I think that's what they're going to do. And even if it's Caleb Williams or if it's Justin Fields, I told you this, I think they're going to be a playoff team next year. I think this
even
team
with Caleb Williams?
Yes. I think this team is moving in the right direction. They have a lot of great pieces around whoever plays quarterback, and I think they're moving in the right direction.
I am so glad that we ended on the Bears because we're going to continue that conversation, but with our draft guys. Pete and Brady, good stuff today. A reminder of the off-season dates here in the NFL. We just talked about the franchise tag window. That will continue on until March 5th. We got the Combine coming up next week. Free agency starts. And before you know it, we'll be talking preseason odds for the Super Bowl.
No off-season for Pete.
No off-season for Pete.
You're working all the way through the end of April then, huh, buddy?